Okay, now how does this sound? Still working?
Sounds good, and screen sharing is working.
Okay, so my name is Ken Cote. I'm with DNR Entomology and Plant Pathology. I work out of the Bloomington field office, and I'm actually a horticulturalist and entomologist. And I'm a little bit from the dark side, being from the ornamentals industry, and I started working on kudzu in 2002. And I've learned a lot about it over the last 19 years. I've been working on the project now, and it's been a real education. What I want to do today is tell you what we're doing in the state and what we're learning from the project, some of the products that we've been using, some of the successes and failures we've had. But I also want to tell you what's going on in your counties. This particular picture here is a kudzu site in Harrison County, and that one is no longer there that we know of. It's been way down and hardly can find kudzu. But it is amazing how large the kudzu gets in the state. All right, now I'm having trouble with my slideshow here. There we go. Try to enter. So, are all of you familiar with the identification of kudzu? How do you guys feel about your identification of kudzu? If for those that are not, you're not, okay. Kudzu is definitely a woody perennial. And if you look at the stems of this, when they're very young, they have small hairs on them, and they're brown hairs. And as they get older, they become woody with lenticels. Now, the leaves of kudzu are alternate compound leaves, and they're trifoliate leaves like a bean leaf. They can get up to 10 inches in diameter. They get quite large. If you see the picture at the top there, the individual leaflets can be simple or they can be lobed, and I'll show you some pictures of lobed leaves. Now, kudzu does flower, but not every site you're going to see flowers. Typically, they occur in late July on through August, and they can be more of a purple to magenta color. Again, it's late summer. The big thing is kudzu's a legume. It's related to redbuds, locust, and actually its closest relative in the state is soybeans. There's a lot of lookalikes of kudzu. We get a lot of reports of things that are not kudzu, which is good because we need the extra eyes out there. But greenbrier can look similar, burr cucumber can look similar, and wild grape can look similar. However, all those that I just mentioned have a simple leaf. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see a grape on the left of that picture and kudzu on the right. Kudzu is a true trifoliate, and it's a much larger individual leaf compared to grape. The kudzu is just much larger leaves. Again, this is a highly lobed form of kudzu. It looks different than what I had shown you earlier. And this is in Martin County. This was taken off of Jenkins Road up near Silverville. And there's genetic variability out there, but this is still kudzu. Now, since I'm more of a horticulturalist and I'm not trained in native plants, this one has thrown me for the curve. And when I first came across this is hog peanut, which is native. It looks very similar to kudzu, especially when you're looking at young plants. However, there's some major differences. The leaf pubescence on hog peanut is white, not brown, and the flowers tend to be whitish pink. And typically the leaves are just much smaller and it doesn't crawl up the trees like kudzu does. There was a case we had where it was a very wet, hot summer, and we did find plants that had very large leaves that looked like kudzu, but closer examination, it was hog peanut with leaves almost as large as kudzu. So it can produce large leaves depending on the growing conditions. Burr cucumber, this is a picture of burr cucumber out in Sullivan County. It can really get aggressive and take over areas. However, this is an annual, and it tends not to climb trees. It can, but in the wintertime, if you look at burr cucumber at this time of year, it's going to have a more bleached white appearance, and you'll see those tendril coils that can occur on burr cucumber. And this is another one I occasionally run into. And sometimes we get reports that look like kudzus, the Chinese yam vine. It's also known as air potato. However, this leaf is it's not a compound leaf, and the leaf's real waxy and small compared to kudzu. But that's another one that's out there. So how fast does kudzu grow? Well, when we go out, we initially measure the sites, and we're measuring the acreage of the sites. And then we went back to some sites to do some just additional measurements to see how fast these things are really growing, because we haven't been able to treat every site. Some sites only increased about 20% over a 10-year period, but we had other sites, well over a 600% increase in 10 years. And then we also had some sites that just appeared to have no change at all. Light can be a factor, soil types can be a factor, the plant composition of the site, how much competition kudzu is getting from other plants. Some of the sites that are on northeast facing slopes that are shaded, we've just seen no change at all in those sites at all. We're working to get rid of them, but they never really got super large. We do have some landowners that are working on eradicating kudzu themselves, which has been helpful because our resources are limited. And we do know you can easily get 30 to 50 feet of growth per year at a lot of sites, especially the further south you go. Am I still coming across clear to everyone?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
So kudzu in Indiana, well, it's all the way up to the Michigan border. Right now, we have confirmed kudzu in 43 counties. We have 208 sites confirmed. And the initial acreage confirmed, in other words, we went out there and measured the site at first onset, was about 227 acres. Again, most of it is south of Interstate 70, and the further south you go in the state, the larger the sites tend to be. Although there are a lot of sites that are less than 1 acre, which is good. Those are the sites that we're going after first. We're basically working north to south, small to big, trying to put out the small fires first. Kudzu has been found in Canada. It was confirmed in Ontario in 2009. So cold weather really doesn't affect this plant. It really has become adapted to colder climate. Again, it's maybe hard to see, but in Daviess County, we confirmed about 0.13 acres, about 6.84 acres in Martin County. But when you start getting down towards Spencer County, 34 acres was confirmed there. And we even have some sites in Spencer County where individual sites are 13 and 14 acres. So, and unfortunately, when the sites get that large, they're cost prohibitive to control. So we're trying to prevent these other sites from getting big while we still have the money to go after them. Now, this map's an overview. All the dots there are where there's kudzu. And right under Martin County, you'll see a dot in the center there that's kind of on its own. That's the site in Shoals. That's the only site in this map that has not been treated. All the other dots you see in that map are under a treatment program and are nearly eradicated. So we've been hitting it hard. But unfortunately, the big one there on the west side of Shoals, we have not been able to go after that. So most of the sites are either treated by DNR, Entomology, INDOT's working on a site. The one site that we know of in Daviess County is along the interstate, and INDOT's been working on that one. And that popped up after the I-69 construction. And interestingly, I found it, called it in, they treated it the first year. The next year it wasn't there, and then this year it came back like it was never treated before. So it's an amazing plant that's just highly resistant. The federal government's been working on sites on Crane. They have good environmental people there that are putting a lot of effort into treating the kudzu. Unfortunately, the site in Shoals, it's just going to be too costly for us to approach because of erosion control issues there. It often costs more to implement erosion control than it does to treat the kudzu. I went and visited that site again this year to see about maybe possibly going on that site in the future and treating it in stages. But there was already so much erosion under those buildings that if we take the kudzu away, although it's not that great of an erosion preventer, it would increase the erosion there, and we may lose the buildings off the hill. There's just a lot of liability at that site. So that's why that's still sitting there. It has not grown too terrible in size. It's increased a little bit. But unfortunately, there are going to be a few sites that are going to have to be let go in the state, and that may be one of them, just because of the situation there with the steepness of the hill and the buildings there. If the buildings weren't there, we could probably take a chance and go for it and get it, but there's so much of a chance for economic loss for that storage facility there. So we've treated about 2.86 acres in Daviess and Martin County. It's mostly gone, and we're going to be going back and doing more spot treating again this year in August and September. Now, with that said, we've only had one report of kudzu in Daviess County along Interstate 69. In the years I've been working on this, we've never had any reports in Daviess County other than that one. If you know of more sites in Daviess County, please let me know so I can look at those sites and get them under our list for potential treatment in the future. It's kind of seems odd that, you know, Daviess County is surrounded by kudzu, but we just don't have a lot of confirmations. Maybe Daviess County just got lucky. So hard to say on that one. Now, I have some before and after pictures here. They're not perfect, but this is a site that was up off of Jenkins Road. It's at the Martin Lawrence County line, and it's quite incredible. This is the site that was highly low. We went in here, and it took us some time, but we did get this suppressed. I went back there the other day just to get some pictures, but there's trees back there now where there were kudzu. Tulip poplar tends to be the first thing to come back. It's just so, you know, such an aggressive plant. It's just such a quick grower. It just comes in quickly. But you can see that in the background there, all those juniper trees, the eastern red cedar, they were actually covered with kudzu, and we were able to save them. Again, it was growing across the road up into the field, and there wasn't a culvert that went through here, so we had to do some overseeding and frost seeding to prevent erosion. But we got this site suppressed. And again, we did lose that main tree, unfortunately, but a lot of other trees are coming back. Now, you can drive by there and you can't really find kudzu very easily, but if you get out of the car and walk around and hunt and peck and look, there's still kudzu there. And you have to do the spot treating, because if it's 2 feet this year, it's 40 feet next year. And it's really a sustained pressure that's needed to continue to suppress kudzu. Now, I got some other oohs and ahs pictures. This is out in Greene County, Indiana. I call this the kudzu monster. This was a 5-acre site we've been working on, and it's quite difficult to control. We are at sites over 10 years in some cases. But it is possible to really suppress it. So chemical control is really our only way to control kudzu. There are some people using animals for suppressing it through grazing. But even with chemical control, the results can be variable between patches. A lot of it depends on the age of the patch, how dense the foliage is. Some kudzu sites have a thicker mat than others, but you gotta get adequate coverage, and it can be more difficult to get adequate coverage in certain areas. There are limited homeowner products available. Some people have went out and they've purchased commercial grade products that are not restricted use, but you're talking anywhere from a $400 to $1,000 investment per purchase to purchase these products. They're expensive products. So, and what's interesting about kudzu, we can go to one site and we can spray it and go with a product, and we get good results. And we take that same product to another site and it won't touch it. So there's a lot of factors involved. Most of our treatment is done in August, September. There's been some research done on where kudzu has been treated during dormant season, and temperatures above 45 or 50. In some cases, Garlon will work, but we don't do that here in Indiana. Our winters are just a little too cold for that to be effective. Well, most of the products we use include Clopirlin and Triclopyr, glyphosate, metsulfuron methyl, and we're trying to incorporate imazapyr. Clopirlin and Triclopyr actually have a similar mode of action. They're auxin growth regulators and indole acetic acid mimics. Glyphosate really is only 60% effective. We don't heavily use that product in our program. It just is not that effective against kudzu. The only time we'll use glyphosate is if there's a serious water issue, if there's a high water table or risk of getting in the water. We don't spray directly in water, but if there's risk, we'll go with a more benign product. Now, glyphosate is an aromatic amino acid inhibitor. It just prevents the growth and nutrient transport of amino acids. If you don't have the amino acid building blocks, the plant's not going to grow. We did have one case up in northern Indiana. This is probably over 10 years ago, where we actually got unbelievably great suppression from glyphosate. But it only ever happened once. It was one of these oddball situations. Metsulfuron methyl, also known as Escort, it's an ALS inhibitor in the plant, and it affects the growth and root formation of the meristems. We have used this product with variable results. It's touted to be very effective against kudzu, and it's almost as effective as some of the other products that like Tordon, which I'll talk about. But we've seen mixed results with this. So we were using it primarily for spot treatments because metsulfuron methyl is not that selective. It will kill almost everything. It'll kill everything broadleaf, and it'll even start having some effects in grasses. So we started incorporating imazapyr for spot treating to see how that will work as we're trying to burn kudzu out. A lot of chemicals labeled out there. The one that is most effective is Tordon or picloram, which is the active ingredient. However, this product can easily move off site and off target and has a very long residual period in the soil. So we stay away from that product because we're trying to conserve trees at many of our sites. Dicamba and 2,4-D, we just stay away from those products because they're volatile and they drift easily. Aminopyrrolin is a close relative of Clopirlin. It's also known as milestone, but it doesn't have the selectivity that aminopyrrolin has, or the Clopirlin has. Clopirlin is highly selective to the bean and composite family, so you can spray right up an oak tree, kill the kudzu, and not harm the oak tree. So what have we been doing in the past is when you first get to a kudzu site, it's so thick you can't walk through it very well. You can't find individual branches. The first year or 2 years, we'll go out in August, September and do a foliar treatment with Clopirlin, which is selective to the bean family and the composite family. Then year 3, we'll continue with Clopirlin, but then you can start to see some of the individual vines, and then you can start to treat some of the individual vines. We used to do a lot of cut stump treatments with glyphosate at 50%, but we're moving away from that, and and I'll talk more about that in a bit. About 3 to 5 years, we get 90% suppression. If we cannot stay on a site for 5 years, we won't even start treating the site. Because if you don't put enough pressure on it, you're wasting your time. Typically, the first year, you're going to get about 50% suppression. Then after those 5-year period, we allow it to fallow for a couple of years, and then we'll come back and spot treat. Are we eradicating kudzu? Some sites, yes. Other sites, we're just continuing to suppress it. It is truly a challenge. Now, if everything behaved the way that this site did in Clay County, I'd be sitting pretty. This was out in Salem City, Indiana. This is out a little south of Brazil. We treated this site with Clopirlin, and in 1 year we got this. All the grasses started coming back. Now, this is what it looked like in 2018, the same site. Trees are there, but we can still go in there and still find sprigs of kudzu. We're only walking in there and maybe treating 1 or 2 gallons of spot treatment, or sometimes even only 3/4 of a gallon. But if you don't get back in there and spot treat that, you will have kudzu return, and they can return pretty quickly. So I want to talk about Clopirlin. We have relied heavily on this chemical for control of kudzu. It's a highly selective product. It's good for areas where there's an abundance of trees because you want to save the trees. Kudzu doesn't like shade. It'll shade out the kudzu if you have a lot of trees. And it reduces our risk of erosion by preserving non-kudzu vegetation. The bad points about Clopirlin is sometimes it seems to be slower acting. Dew is an issue with kudzu, with Clopirlin, because it always is applied at a high volume, low concentration. And what we learned early on is that if there's dew in the leaves, it's actually enough moisture there to dilute the product and reduce the efficacy. So we got to wait for dew to dry to apply Clopirlin, and that's often very difficult in August and September when we have such high relative humidities. So dew is an issue, and also it selects out for briars when you have repeated use of Clopirlin. And this has actually been reported in a number of studies that were conducted with Clopirlin. And the problem with that is as you're spraying kudzu and you get more and more briars, your accessibility becomes more difficult to do the spot treating. Now, this is a site down in Warwick County where we sprayed Clopirlin for years, and we got so much of a problem with briars, we couldn't even get in there to physically treat the kudzu. So we had to come in about 6 weeks ahead of application, mow down the area, and then allow for the kudzu to regrow and then go back and spot treat. Now, over time, we've done less and less of this, and we're getting trees to come back there. If you just let the briars go and let everything run its course, the trees will eventually come back, but so will the kudzu. But we started doing this more in a grid type of pattern and selecting out and leaving trees go and then continually spot treating. In hindsight, we should have went in that area with Triclopyr, and I'm going to talk more about that. So this is one of our goofs, but not goofs. It was a real learning experience for us. So we were forced in one year where there was an endangered mussel species near a kudzu site, and we had to move away from Clopirlin because Clopirlin has a little bit more longer half-life in the soil compared to Triclopyr. Now, Triclopyr and Clopirlin are in the same mode of action, but for some reason, Triclopyr seems to be working very effectively, and in more cases, it's working more effectively than Clopirlin metsulfuron methyl. And this was really unexpected to us because the mode of action is similar, and a lot of the literature doesn't suggest this, but in Indiana, Triclopyr 3 or Garland 3 is doing a great job for us. So 2014, we went out to this site. In the areas where it was tree covered, we still used Clopirlin because we didn't want to kill the trees, but in the open areas, we used Triclopyr 3. And then we went back and we used Triclopyr 3 in open areas. And then we started treating individual vines with basal bark treatments of Triclopyr 4, Garland 4. And we got 95% suppression in 2 years. This is what it looked like the first year, and this is the 1 year after application. I could not believe the success we got. We're still working on this site. There's still some kudzu in there, but it actually bought us some time to use Triclopyr. We got it under control quicker and may have saved future costs. So we're actually now kind of looking at a newer approach. And in areas without trees or without serious erosion risks, Triclopyr seems to be better because it avoids the accessibility issues that are produced with Clopirlin and briar regrowth. Now, we are working on one very large site. That large site I had shown you in Greene County, and we are using Triclopyr out there because we sprayed it with Clopirlin for 2 years in a row and nothing happened. So it wouldn't respond to the Clopirlin at all. So what we're doing in that case, if we have sites that have erosion issues and we're getting response from Clopirlin, we'll use that. If not, we will go in and we will overseed in the fall during a frost seed and try to get grass growing under there, and then come back in and start treating with Triclopyr and keep reseeding and keep doing frost seedings, and eventually you can change the area from kudzu to grass. Now that works well on pasture areas or right-of-ways. That's fine. That wouldn't be practical in a forest situation, but in some situations it is working for us. So we've done a lot of spot treating, and we typically will treat for those 5 years, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to spot treat for year 6 and 8 and fallow for year 7 and 9. What's interesting about kudzu is after you spray it for a while, it can undergo a dormancy that lasts 2 to 10 years. So once you think you have it, you better keep looking for it. And what we're finding out is we have some sites where we haven't seen kudzu for 6 or 7 years, and then we go back and all of a sudden it's there again. And it's just amazing. So when we start getting later in the project, years 9, 10 and on, we're constantly going back and just trying to keep the pressure on to burn out the kudzu. And we're at some sites 14 years now, to believe it or not. We're not using a lot of product there, but we still have to do those site visits and spot treat. Again, we've incorporated metsulfuron methyl and imazapyr with mixed results for spot treating. And we'll have to see how that plays out over time. Some sites we are burning them out, but we're trying to get to different modes of action to manage resistance and just get the kudzu under control. So, cut stump versus basal bark treatments, which is better? Well, cut stump gives you the instant results of cutting that plant and reducing the photosynthetic capability on the vine. Plus, it makes you feel good. But you get a compartmentalization and a wound response in that plant, and it may reduce uptake. It's very likely it reduces uptake. So in many cases, we're finding out that basal bark treatments are just as effective, in which you take a concentrated product and you spray the 12 to 18 inches of the bottom of the vine, and it goes right in that plant and kills that plant. There's no wounding. You don't have to cut. You just get in there, put the product on, and it takes the vine out. It's very effective. It's time consuming and labor intensive, but it's a good way to control drift, a good way to concentrate how your product is going on and control how your product is going on. When you spray in the trees, you do get the risk of drift. But with the basal bark, really, we have to do that more towards year 3. You're not going to be able to do that the first year because it's just too thick to find those individual vines. Now, this is cut stump failure.
I'm just going to ask just to kind of wrap it up here in the next couple minutes so that we have some time for questions.
Sure. So cut stump failures have occurred. We have had regrowth on cut stumps. So I always like this picture here. This is kudzu growing on a mulberry tree. Can you see the kudzu in this picture?
Oh yeah.
It's very hard to see. It's right in the middle of the plant. It's hard to find this stuff. So this is what happens if you miss a kudzu vine. In 2 years, it grows from nothing to up the tree. This is 2 years of growth at a site in Daviess County, nearly 100 feet.
There we go.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 137 sites that are under our DNR treatment program, and there's been other people treating kudzu in the state. And so far, there's about 140 sites that have just little to no kudzu growth out of the 200 and some we know of. So in 2020, there were 65 sites with no kudzu growth that we could be detected. About 36 sites appear to be eradicated, but again, we're cautiously optimistic about that. An additional 75 sites just have low density and only require spot treating. Most kudzu north of State Route 64 has been treated, but the further south we go, the more difficult it is for us to treat sites. A lot of our effort is going into the spot treatment and monitoring. We're not going after a lot of new sites because if we stretch ourselves too thin and are not able to go back and retreat sites, we're going to lose what we've gained. So typically we treat between 60 and 70 sites a year, and logistically, this is all our division can handle. So at this point, we are just holding the line and trying to maintain what we've gained. So, does everyone still hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, that's good. For some reason, my computer is shutting off my microphone automatically without me doing anything, and I haven't figured that one out yet. I will have to talk to one of our computer guys.
Oh, okay.
So it might be something on my end.
Okay.
And it occasionally shuts my speakers off too. So, so I'm going to stop sharing here and then open it up for questions. Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you. If you want to have your camera on, I guess you can. If that was the issue with your microphone instead, maybe it's best that we see you.
Then let's give it a shot here. Okay. Well, I really appreciate your time today, everyone, and feel free to ask any questions, or if you have any questions, let me know.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm curious to know who the landowner is on that Shoals site, and do they have is there any regulatory compliance that they have to do something, or what can be done? It just seems like.
Well, it's a new landowner that someone just recently.
Jim Marshall owns some of it.
Who is it?
Jim Marshall. He lives in the house that's just below the storage units. He sold the storage units. He owned them at one time, and now he just owns the house that's there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's doing this. So it could be that the internet just keeps burping. So we've talked to Jim Marshall in the past, and we looked at possibly treating that early on, but we don't have the funds right now. As far as legalities, yes, we're asking people to try their best to suppress it, but we don't really enforce that unless there's multiple complaints, because we do understand that people don't necessarily have the means to control it or the money to control it. In many cases, we're over $5,000 an acre to control kudzu. So if we have to do something, we would have to go through a court order to do that. And really, unfortunately, all that will do is frustrate people, and you'll get less cooperation in the future.
Ken, do you think it mostly spreads by seed?
Okay, I apologize for this. I'm not sure why it continues to do this, but so we've tried to work with Jim, and we've tried to, but we couldn't do anything for him. And as far as enforcement goes in that site, we're not enforcing anything on that site at this time. We try to work in a more cooperative manner with people, because we don't want to frustrate people. We just want to work with them.
Did you hear Karen's question on, does it spread mostly by seed, or is there another method?
It can spread by seed, but most of the times it's human transportation, moving on mowing equipment. We've had it moved on hay bales. A lot of times people have planted it. My granddaddy brought that up from Florida. So it's mainly vegetative. A lot of times the seed that gets in there doesn't even reach the ground because of the thick kudzu mats. We do know seed is viable in the state. At one time it was thought not to be viable, but it is viable in the state. But there's a lot of variability. Some sites will produce seed and others don't. In many cases, it's vegetative movement. So.
I will say too, on that Shoals site, I know I've talked to Teresa about it before. And I don't know if this is the same one, but she mentioned, I don't know if it was Ecologic or a company had come out to quote for the erosion control that would have to take place if the kudzu was removed, and the landowner it was astronomical. The landowner just couldn't afford it. So.
Yeah, that's the Ecologic's been the one that's been winning the contracts, and we've been working with them for years on kudzu, and they will be doing it again. But it is very expensive, and that's really the approach we take. Hey, we have the funds to help you, and we want to work with you on this and get this cleaned up. We understand there's a legal obligation to clean this up, but we also understand that not everyone's going to have the funds to do that. So even looking at a cost share program, if you're looking at a cost share program, there was a large site in over 7 acres down off of Loudon's Chapel Road in Harrison County. So you're talking cost share. The cost share program is only good for 2 years in a lot of cases. But, you know, so you're looking at, you know, $8,000, $16,000 over a 2-year period, and they have to do 75-25. Well, they got to come up with $4,000 out of their pocket. And a lot of people don't have that right now. So, you know, we're really trying to work that. We work a lot on private properties. We work in commercial properties. So we do a little bit of both. And from our standpoint, we got to treat everyone fairly. If we treat the commercial property one way, we got to treat the other one, the homeowner, the same way. So if we're going to go after a site, you know, we got to work under an agreement with the owner. And so, you know, I don't know what can be done with that site. You know, the main thing is controlling the erosion at that site. It's just cost prohibitive for us. And I'm not an erosion control specialist. I'm a horticulturalist and entomologist. I actually did a lot of, the NRCS is the ones that have assisted me with the erosion control on a lot of the sites. So if there's something there that could be worked out where, okay, the NRCS can help pick up the bill on erosion and be responsible for the erosion, then maybe we can go in there and do it, you know? But my job is to get rid of the kudzu without, you know, causing more issues. And even under our landowner agreement that we have with landowners, it says DNR is responsible for the erosion. And we do that because, okay, if we're going to go in there and disturb things, then we got to fix it and clean it up. We don't want to leave them with a mess. There's another site in Floyd County in Spickert Knob, and that site we have left go also because there was fear of the road sliding off the hill. What was ironic, a couple of winters ago, I got a phone call from the highway department and said, hey, there's kudzu there. I said, yeah, we know about it because we haven't been able to do anything because we don't want the road to slide off the hill. They said, well, it already did last night. So, I mean, there was multiple millions of dollars they had to do to fix it. So, you know, unfortunately, due to the nature of that site there, under DNR's program, it is not a high priority. But if we want to open up communication with the landowner or we want to treat it in sections or something, I could run that by my boss. And we'd have to get written permission from every landowner there to go on there to treat. So,
Okay.
but that would be a couple of years down the road from now, funding wise, any possibility. So.
Well, maybe we'll keep this in mind for our group in contacting landowners, or at least tracking who's in charge of it down, you know, through the years, and maybe it's a future project that we take on.
It could be. I would love to see it go because we got everything else in the county. It'd be really nice to get that out of there. But so
I was going to say for Daviess County, we will keep this in mind. My position is funded by a clean water grant. We just got another one for another 3 years. And one of the projects that we're going to be doing with the SWCD is roadside surveys this year and possibly next year as well. So I had already planned to do a summer roadside survey in Daviess County because we've started noticing Japanese hops on some of the water crossings. So I can keep an eye out for kudzu at that same time and let you know if we find any new patches.
that sounds good.
All right, well, I'm gonna try to keep us going. Are there any other last minute questions for Ken before we let him go?
Well, thank you everyone for your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thanks, Ken.